Are feminine archetypes real? A psychological perspective. That's a question many people ask when they first encounter the idea. Feminine archetypes aren't real in the scientific sense. They are not measurable or universally proven concepts, yet they remain psychologically and culturally meaningful. Think of them like myths or symbols. They are not literally true, but they speak to deeper patterns we recognize in ourselves. Archetypes cannot be tested in a laboratory, but they appear in dreams, stories, behavior, and emotional life, often becoming powerful tools for self-understanding. Most people encounter archetypal patterns long before they ever hear the word itself. We recognize them instinctively. The independent woman who refuses compromise, the caregiver who holds everything together, the rebel who walks away when something no longer feels true. These recurring figures often reflect culturally shaped ideas about femininity, responsibility, autonomy, and emotional connection. Across cultures and generations, similar feminine roles appear again and again, suggesting shared ways of interpreting women's lived experience. Carl Jung described archetypes as recurring psychological images emerging from what he called the collective unconscious, a shared layer of symbolic memory shaped by human experience across time. Whether or not one accepts this theory scientifically becomes almost secondary. What matters is that people consistently recognize themselves in these patterns. We rely on stories to understand who we are, and archetypes offer language for experiences that otherwise remain vague or difficult to articulate. You may notice this in everyday life. At different moments, you behave like entirely different versions of yourself. At work, you may be decisive and strategic. In relationships, softer or more accommodating. During periods of change, restless or searching. None of these identities cancel one another out. They reflect different internal roles coming forward depending on circumstance. Seen this way, feminine archetypes are less about labels and more about awareness. They help name tendencies already present but rarely examined consciously. Instead of asking, "Which archetype am I?" a more useful question becomes, "Which part of me is leading right now?" This shift changes how personal struggles are understood. Feeling exhausted does not necessarily mean something is wrong. It can signal that one psychological role has been overused while another has been neglected. Loss of motivation, relationship tension, or a persistent sense of disconnection often becomes easier to interpret when viewed as patterns rather than personal failure. Many people begin searching for concepts like archetypes during periods of uncertainty, particularly when they feel disconnected from themselves or unsure of who they have become. A loss of direction, emotional exhaustion, or the quiet sense of no longer recognizing one's own life often prompts deeper questions. Why do I feel different from who I used to be? Why does stability or achievement no longer feel satisfying? Psychological frameworks such as feminine archetypes offer a way of understanding these transitions without immediately treating them as problems to be corrected. Rather than assuming something has gone wrong, archetypal thinking suggests that inner priorities may be shifting. What once felt essential no longer fits, while neglected aspects of identity begin asking for attention. This helps explain why archetypes continue to resonate within a modern psychological context. They provide structure without imposing rigid identity, a framework rather than a rulebook. Once these patterns become visible, something subtle changes. Choices appear where previously there only seemed to be automatic reactions. If archetypes are useful at all, it is not because they define who we are, but because they reveal possibilities that remain unseen while we identify too strongly with a single role. Many people move through life shaped by one dominant feminine pattern while suppressing others. Over time, this imbalance can appear as fatigue, dissatisfaction, or the persistent feeling of living slightly out of alignment with oneself. Exploring feminine archetypes offers a different perspective. Instead of attempting to correct personality traits or force change through discipline alone, it allows internal patterns to be observed with curiosity. What feels natural? What feels learned? Which parts of you have been encouraged and which have gradually disappeared from view? These questions rarely produce immediate answers. They unfold gradually through reflection, lived experience, and language that helps make sense of inner change. For many readers, archetypes become less a theory and more a practical way of recognizing recurring emotional and behavioral patterns in everyday life.